later on today, being Wednesday, we take a look at mental health, and specifically men's mental health. We do know that men usually suffer mental health very quietly, and for one reason or the other, they don't want to come out and talk about it. So that's a subject that we're going to be tackling this morning, and would like you to weigh in as usual and let us know what your thoughts are on that as we continue with the discussion. But also later on, we'll be looking at computer literacy, and somebody who's taken it upon themselves to ensure that that computer literacy is not just left to those who can afford and those who are in the urban areas, but what do those who live in the slums do, given that they also need to literally be in step when it comes to literacy, when it comes to your computers and all that. And we're going to be getting into that and discussing that right here on Morning Express. The hashtag is KTN Morning Express. If you'd like to tweet, it's at KTN News KE, or you can also tweet me directly, and that's at Michael G. Gitonga. It'll be great to hear what you have to say regarding the show and some of the topics that we're going to be looking at as we go along. But for now, let's start off by looking at what is making headlines on those international dailies, and starting with The Citizen, which is in Tanzania, where apparently they're going to be enjoying their December a little bit more than they would have expected, and this is because relief as fuel prices decrease. Now, Tanzanian motorists will be experiencing a relief in fuel expenditure in December as the prices of petroleum products slightly decrease starting Wednesday, and that is starting today. So, well, let's wait and see whether Kenya will also, enjoy that privilege. But there you go, Tanzania, all the best with that. Let's look at the Daily Monitor. This is in Uganda, and we do know there's been quite a bit of scuffles going on, particularly to do with the reforms that have been taking place in Uganda, with Yoweri Kaguta Museveni still, ruling with an iron fist. And according to this particular article on the Daily Monitor, human life has no price. That's according to Bobi Wine, as he tells Museveni. We do know that after the protests, that followed his arrest, a number of Ugandans lost their lives as they were protesting his arrest and, exercising their freedom of speech. And Bobi Wine coming out there to say that human life has no price. Let's look at the Daily, the East African, and this is, let's see what's there. We have the East African, what Joe Biden promised Uhuru during phone call. Interesting right there. He expressed his interest in partnership with Kenya on issues tackling the threat of climate change, supporting refugees, and addressing challenges of regional security. We do know that security has been one of those major issues that we have had. So Joe Biden there taking up the reins, and still looking at the U.S., we do know that there was also an article to do with no evidence still found regarding the vote rigging that was claimed by the President Donald Trump. Let's look at a different newspaper, Rwanda Daily. And the EAC is upbeat as Biden will revive stalled trade talks. And as we've seen, he had talks with Uhuru Kenyatta and agreed on a number of things. But the East African community is also quite upbeat and very positive regarding some of the revival of some of the trade talks that had now taken a back seat. Let's take a look at the next newspaper there, and that's a CNN. And China has promised millions of coronavirus vaccines to countries globally, and it is ready to deliver them. China coming out there and saying that they do have quite a number of vaccines that are ready, have been tested, and can be delivered. But one of the challenges that is being faced world over is what they're calling infodemic, and that is to do with a lot of misinformation when it comes to the coronavirus vaccine, and the fact that there's a lot of misinformation that is going around and what is now popularly known as fake news in regards to that. And as a result, there is, questions as to how we are going to make reasonable decisions when it comes to our health. And that is because of a lot of misinformation that is going round and about. There you go. That's what we have on the international dailies. And we are now going to take a look at what we have on the local dailies. And as usual, We're going to start off with the Standard, but joining me this morning, we are joined by Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, who's a Member of Parliament for Nambale. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Mheshimiwa, via technology and video link. Thank you for joining us this morning. Karibu.
Controls into the United States have become an increasingly common occurrence.
All right, and we go straight to the Standard, where we start off with a headline, and this is the former CS for Treasury, and it is Honorable Rotich, and the headline here is Rotich, I was fixed. This is to do with Kimwarer and Kimwarer Dam, Aror and Kimwarer Dam, and he says that his hands were tied when it came to some of the decisions that were made. But of course, as we know, he is facing accusations in court, and as a result, according to him, he was a sacrificial lamb. Now, Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, one of the challenges I think we have as a country is that we never get to the bottom of things. And of course, it is expected that everybody is going to play the blame game and push the blame to the next person. What are your thoughts on this particular story, given that we are not yet at the bottom of what happened to those fans with the Aror and Kimwarer dams?
Thank you very much, Mike. This is an interesting one. Clearly, when large sums of money are banded around, when they are moved and removed and circulated around, there are many players in the game. It may indeed be that the origin wasn't just a single person, but I think it is a chain. It's a chain, and the chain normally has many players along the line. It would be interesting if we take this calmly to wait and see, then who else was it? Who is sacrificing him? He might, in the process of his own defense, perhaps give, throw some light on it. It takes a number of people on the technical side to initiate what they did. And in one of the dams, and I don't remember exactly which one of them, they hadn't done a feasibility study yet. It takes a lot of guts to get those kinds of steps skipped. But I think he might be right that by saying sacrificial, he means there are others in the game. It does not mean he's innocent, I would think.
Right.
But it simply means there are definitely other people in the game, and hopefully we shall know who they are.
All right, Mheshimiwa, your thoughts on how we are doing as a country when it comes to getting to the bottom of particularly matters to do with corruption. And this is just another scandal. I mean, we could list so many that we have had about, right from the days of Golden Bag to the days of things to do with passports. But here we are now with another one. And on the Daily Nation, we have yet another murder threats on COVID billions theft plot. We'll get to KEMSA, but generally speaking, do you feel like we make any progress when it comes to matters corruption?
I feel that we have made great progress in whistleblowing and discovery and announcements, so that once we get the headlines, they entertain us virtually, and I mean the word entertain literally, or they occupy our minds for a fleeting moment, maybe a few days, sometimes a few weeks, or intermittently for months. And then after that, when they go into the institutions where they ought to go for rigorous work to be done, they seem to die forever. They keep telling us we are working on it, we are working on it. I still am yet to see NYS 1 or anything happening. What the hell are they waiting for? And so on. So I see clearly that these kinds of things in Kenya, we're excellent at whistleblowing, and then that's also a good thing in a democracy. But are the institutions that ought to carry this forward, on which we rely for investigation, for assessment, and for prosecution through the courts, and the courts themselves for determination of guilt, are letting us down. Once it gets off the headlines, I think the people who work on it, they seem to turn their attention to something else, and nobody is disproving that. Clearly, also the DPP seems also to want to catch the headlines. After the headlines are off, we never get to know really what has happened. And there's a large number of cases, they're accumulating. And by the way, it's not new. We have had these kinds of things from the 70s, from the first administration to Moi administration, and so on. And those during the Kibaki, they are all piling up. We don't know whenever they will be taken up. I agree with you entirely that our biggest asset has been in discovery and in hitting the headlines. But after that, after the sensational news are off the headlines, it's gone.
Right. And, well, talking of which, the Daily Nation, I did mention that the headline here is Murder Threat on COVID Billions Theft Plot. Now, a senior official reveals that his CEO was under pressure to act in a certain way. And according to the confession that he was making, apparently there were forces which they refer to as deep state that had threatened that should they not favor some of the people they had wanted to be given those procurement deals, they were going to make the CEO disappear. This, of course, are very, very serious allegations, given that there are threats of life. But again, Kenyans might be forgiven to be wary that there might be nothing that will come out of this other than just what we have here as a headline that is shocking news, but it ends at shocking news.
Yes, that's exactly. It's the same kind of thing we just said about the headline Standard. But in respect of threats, clearly it demonstrates one thing, in my view, that the way the COVID billions were moving was as a result of probably orders, directions, or strong interests, or people who have a big say in this country. And the only security a threatened person has got is to go public. If you don't go public, you can still disappear. If you go public, you probably get an element of safety, personal safety, that's what you're talking about. And also, I would think that also the DPP and the DCI first, and then, of course, perhaps the DPP later, certainly the DCI would have moved in quickly and just zeroed in on those aspects of a threat. That's a crime, not even related to COVID, then it becomes an additional crime, as you can list the list of crimes that people have committed.
Right.
You can zero in and find out who is giving the threats and charge those people as well for obstructing whatever. I don't know if it's obstructing justice, but for whatever the offense, I know it's an offense. So it isn't something that it should also just say, oh, well, yes, but no, we don't know, let us follow. No, I think we must follow the trails. And if you follow the trails and people know that giving a threat means they'll go for them. And let me tell you, the so-called influential big people are highly sensitive to being exposed, highly sensitive to being prosecuted before the law. They worry a lot more than the small clerk that you sometimes, of course, he loses a livelihood, but the big ones seem to lose even more. They fall with a thud. So the weakness is in the side of our institutions like the DCI, in this case, and perhaps followed later, could be EACC in some cases as well. And this should never go off their backs. This is something they should be able to live with the rest of their lives, meaning that those kinds of offenses, they don't go away. So when people get threatened and nobody goes in their defense, you don't expose the persons who are doing the threatening so they can back off. Then we are putting in jeopardy officers who hold responsibilities, and their only strength is the salary they earn. They may earn a lot of money, but they may not have much depth in terms of support. So if you go public, you can normally head off those who are threatening. We have seen murders, Michael, in this country in the course of duty. So probably it cannot be wished away. You can't say, no, that's no such thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, corruption pushes back. It can push back quite viciously.
Yes, and of course we'd expect that the authorities and those who have been tasked with the responsibility of security would step in and get to the bottom of this. But again, like we say, unfortunately, it is something that many Kenyans might feel never gets to the bottom. But there you go. Those are the two headlines. But let's look at other stories that are in the dailies this morning. And on the Standard, page 2, we have state job cuts loom as Yetani deal with IMF for more cash. And whereas this, of course, is not very good news for Kenyans, we have corporations that either might be merged, and as a result, with the restructuring, some civil servants would lose their jobs, or some that may actually even be made obsolete to fit to what, according to this article, is an agreement between IMF and Kenya for them to ensure that they reduce their number of staff, but also make their working efficiency. Maybe just to get your comments on this, Mheshimiwa, but as you give your comments, also the fact that we certainly, as a country, need to make our work more efficient, but also reduce on ghost workers, which we seem to have many of in many government institutions. But your thoughts on this particular article?
This is very interesting. By the way, before I comment on this specific article, I want to say that the model the IMF uses, by the time IMF is called in, there is an imbalanced economy. Either you are spending more than you are earning revenue, you are unable to service your desk because you don't have enough foreign exchange, your export performance has declined, and so IMF comes in for a quick stabilization sort of arrangement. And in doing so, they will ask the government, you're living beyond your means, which is definitely true. That's a definition of a deficit. We are living beyond our means. What are you going to do to improve? They don't come in turn with a solution. They come in turn with hard questions. And usually you have either to increase your earnings, which doesn't happen quickly, but you can cut your expenses. And you're not going to cut expenses, rather you can't, but governments don't offer to cut expenses on pet projects that they have got, even if they, particularly because these were pushed by individuals and so on. But they may go on the soft sectors. They'll can say, oh, we'll slow down education expenditure, or get more cost savings in education and in health. And if you have cost savings, you reduce the amount that government is spending. That's a typical approach that happens. Now, these offers are made by government to the IMF. The IMF simply puts pressure on them, and the government says, oh, no, we can't respond to this. Otherwise, of course, they won't get the funding. So this is what you expect. And normally, because there's a lot of hardship, it's not an easy matter. Look at Kenya now in the health sector. Services are barely adequate because of the pressure, in addition to other things, of COVID. And yet, maybe those are the sectors government will slow down expenditure, or slow down means cutting, really. They don't say we have cut. Look at education. We have a bulging population. And we have had with COVID, kids are sitting at home. The pressure on parents and everybody is so big, even to meet the COVID protocols. And those are the areas that are normally targeted. So it is, it's not going to be an easy thing. So what you see on page 2 really fits into the typical model of the IMF, which has been about the same for many years, and the typical response of governments. And what the governments will do, the next headline will be IMF insists, IMF demands. They don't say, we as government have offered that to get the IMF package, we will do the following. See, it doesn't come out like that usually in the press.
Right. And maybe just generally speaking, I'm sure you probably have experience in running a small business. One of the things that you do is try and keep your overheads as low as possible. Why do you think as a government we don't seem to, unless now we have pressure, say from IMF or outside forces, we don't seem to try and make our work as efficient as we possibly can? Because ultimately, as much as people may lose jobs initially, it will build the economy with time, and as a result we're able to now maybe have expansion in some of those corporations, expansion in some of those government projects that are there. What do you think is the reason that we don't seem to keep our overheads down as a country? The lack of a will. I have described the process very, very well indeed. What happens in the commercial sector, but also happens in governments. You find that most governments around the world, when things tighten up, they take corrective action continuously. You do not allow expansion in areas where you are unable to fund. You scale it down. You grow it in areas where I think are the top priority. And the priorities shift. They can't be the same every day. Priorities don't grow like big pillars. Priorities can shift. So if you don't make these corrective actions, they pile up. And then the next thing that happens, if you did so in the private sector, you are on the brink of bankruptcy, or perhaps you're even there, or perhaps you even declare bankruptcy. Governments don't declare bankruptcy. They struggle to pay, and there are various ways. They'll increase taxes if they can. Yes, they might indeed cut back services. They might seek to increase productivity, perhaps, and all kinds of things. They may negotiate with the trade unions to slow down their demands, if any, or even accept lesser benefits for their members. They can do various things. Right.
But this can be done continuously without waiting for a bank. If you wait for a bank, then you have worked with IMF.
All right, and moving on to another article on page 3, and this is to do with COVID-19. And WHO is getting concerned that amidst information that is out there, there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to COVID-19, and specifically to do with the rumors. And according to WHO, they say that they are fighting misinformation that is making it very difficult for people to make good decisions when it comes to their health. And the same force is using using to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Maybe just to get your comments on this, because again, we are in an information age. There's a lot of what we now refer to as fake news, and as a result, even as governments and health organizations are working day and night to find a solution and vaccine for COVID-19, misinformation becomes a huge, or what they're now referring to as infodemic that we need to deal with.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. This age of fake news is really a difficult one, and it requires everybody to educate themselves, to arm themselves with a critical eye, to always say, is it really true? Can this be corroborated? And so on. That does not happen with everybody. Those who have access to information may be able to compare different sources and see what's happening. Let us take the issue of the vaccine, for example. There's a very stiff cutthroat competition among the pharmaceuticals. They have always been. Every side pushing to be the ones that have their vaccine first on the market, so they can capture the market share. And then there's also sort of an implicit Cold War. If you're in America, everything that comes out of Russia or China must be treated with suspicion. If you are in China, everything that comes out of America must be treated with suspicion. So it requires many people, all of us, to think critically on which one is information, which is misinformation. And remember, there's also politics around, there's global politics around this whole thing, particularly after the debacle in the US and Trump. Everybody's trying to outdo the other. And even what seems official information, rather not official, seems like the correct information could be misinformation, even if it comes from government agencies and so on.
Right.
So it's really a very confusing one. And I can't see a clear rule except just to be skeptical all the time.
All right, and of course that is left again to us to do our due diligence. We do know that in this information age there is a lot that is going out there that is true and others that is not true. And of course it becomes a very difficult thing to, literally know what is true and what is not. Still on matters pandemics and pandemic affects HIV treatment goal. And of course yesterday being the 1st of December. It's a day that the world commemorates and puts a lot of focus on AIDS, HIV and AIDS, so World AIDS Day being that. And restricted movement affects HIV testing campaigns, while a lack adherence. Maybe, Mheshimiwa, just to get it from your constituents and where you're seated at, what are your views on what progress we have made in regards to HIV and AIDS? We do know at some point one of the issues that we were fighting was what we'd call stigma, and the fact that there was also culture and some people who did not believe that even HIV and AIDS was real. It was more to do with witchcraft. What are your comments and feelings of what progress that we have made as a country, and maybe specifically in your constituency?
First of all, I think we had made a number of strides, positive strides in containment of HIV and AIDS. To the extent that there was more realization, many people who are in the communities, you get to know so-and-so is positive and so-and-so goes for medication frequently. People, I think, had settled down that with the retrovirals, the drugs, with the medicines that they were using, they could lead a near normal life or perhaps largely normal life. They may have crises from time to time, but they were able to contain it and go about their own duties in their own households. That went very well, I would say. I think it was going the right direction. The only thing, I think there are a few areas of intrinsic weakness. The younger people thought that this is something you catch only if you're older. So there's always a risk in that youthful category. That age of exploration is really very dangerous. But then came COVID. And when COVID came, it had such publicity and it was indeed real, being a pandemic, being an endemic problem, that people almost thought it's taken away HIV. It's like, oh, now you don't have to worry about HIV, you just worry about corona. All you have to do now is put on a mask. That was one side. The second side of it was, oh, by the way, if you get diagnosed with COVID-19, you and your whole family will go to quarantine and you have to pay for it. And you can imagine rural communities like in my own constituency who live on barely $1 a day, and you taking your entire family, maybe 10 people or more, immediate ones, and now where do you go? How do you leave your households to go out? Those days, home isolation was not an option. And even if it's isolation at home, how these are precarious livelihoods. How do you make a living if you can't leave your home, even go to the market, that kind of thing, or to ease off your stress, even go to the church? So there were a lot of problems around that. And in my constituency and county, we are a border county. So we are exposed to movements in the process of getting out of Kenya and in the process of getting into Kenya, plus the normal movements back and forth across the border lines. And I think in respect of HIV, the awareness had begun to save us. But now that that has gone to the background, there are very huge risks. People are scared of going to hospitals. They might catch corona now. It looks like homes now are safer than hospitals. And by not going to hospitals, they can't get their TB checked. They can't get their HIV support programs that they have got. People are just afraid. So it's really a very serious problem. And now, of course, you see some health facilities were made COVID centers. Now, which means if you tell a villager, they say, oh, you know, if you go to such and such a place, if you go to Alupe is one of our infectious diseases, infectious diseases hospital.
Right.
If you go to Alupe, you'll find only COVID people that don't go there. That's the place they treat infectious diseases, skin disease and others. So indeed, this age is a very dangerous age. And I know it's true in many different countries for different reasons, that because corona is so much at the forefront, people have forgotten about the importance of other illnesses. And counseling that was going on through health services is indeed a real crisis. In responding to this, I think, Michael, that the agencies, a Minister of Health, of course, and I know you're going to discuss issues of mental health after this, but other agencies as well, need to come into bear to be able to give relief to people, mental relief, that in fact, no, you have to find your way out of this and continue to take care of what you had before, well, as you guard against this new thing called COVID-19.
Right.
I think we tend to emphasize one thing at a time too much. People even think that now the other ones, because they're off the headlines and off the news, they are no longer an issue. And now those have been building up. And we have had very depressing news all week, last week, at the rate of increase, not just of infection rates, but of deaths due to HIV and perhaps AIDS, HIV/AIDS. So I think it's really, really a critical time. We have to think more broadly and let people know that the old problems haven't gone away unless you deal with them.
Absolutely. And we're going to finish off now with matters BBI. On The Nation, page 4 and 5, there's quite a lot. Their final BBI battleground to be in courts, election laws suggest. We have the likes of Kiunjuri, who is the Service Party leader, now changing tune and joining the BBI bandwagon. We see also the team that has been tasked with getting signatures, targeting to get 5 million by Friday. The requirement is 1 million, but they're surpassing that by leaps and bounds, and they're hoping to get 5 million by Friday. Mheshimiwa, when we find politicians uniting and agreeing, and singing one song, should that be a cause for concern for us as the citizenry?
It should be a great cause for concern. In our normal lives, we start within our own households. It's rare and difficult to get continuous unanimity. You may strike it from time to time, but you must have an errant child, who is coming back late, who is not doing their chores, and all those little things. You get out to the nation or to a bigger environment. The way we have different pressures on us can't be that we all agree across the board. And personally, I do not see how BBI could be something that brings out that kind of unanimity across the board. I think, Michael, when you hear particularly political leaders suddenly agreeing, even those that were reluctant, suddenly agreeing, there is something common to them that they are seeing. And I think people are fighting to get, at the moment, just to get exclusion, so that they are not secluded in a corner. But by agreeing, coming in, pushing for signatures, by the way, does not mean that they are going to support the referendum itself. We don't know what kind of response there would be. And if they should all agree, then we should really worry that we have amendments in which the political class agrees without much persuasion. Then there is a real problem. So I think that as a society, I would expect now our civil society people and other analysts who look at our society more critically and who are not inside the game, who are not politicians like myself, will now begin to situate this and say, when you get an elite that seems to unanimously agree very quickly, there is a gravy in there, and there are benefits in there. And that is something to look at critically on this one.
All right, thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Because of time, we're going to wind up the newspaper review right about there. But thank you for joining us this morning, bright and early, just to look at what's making headlines on the daily. It is